Okay, so in tab H is where we have this publication from the IRS. So this is straight from the IRS website, and it is called the Tax Guide for Churches and Religious Organizations. This has a lot of good information in here for you. So we'll just kind of tell you all what's in here, where you can go to find answers to some of the questions that this document might answer. First of all, we want to talk about on page 3, it talks about tax exempt status. And what does that mean exactly? So what it doesn't mean is that you're exempt from North Carolina sales tax. And that is a question that we actually get quite a bit, that people get confused thinking, well, we're tax exempt, so we shouldn't have to pay sales tax on our purchases. So North Carolina wants your money in the meantime. So you pay sales tax when you do the purchases, and then you can request a refund at, I think, twice a year. So you're not really exempt from it, but you will get it back if you file for it. So just want to clear that up as far as the 501c3 status. That means you're tax exempt. You don't have to file the 990, but you are paying sales tax at the time of purchase.
The forms for the refund and how that works. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We're actually going to talk about that in tab U, so we'll get there. Okay. Okay. So all of our local churches are covered under our group ruling that we got from the IRS. The general church is the one that maintains that, and so all of the churches are automatically included in that. Sometimes you might need to provide proof of that for certain reasons, if you're doing a fundraiser or that kind of thing. So you could get the 501c3 letter from us. And we can also provide a letter, usually from the bishop's office, that says, so-and-so church is part of the conference, which is covered under the group ruling with the general church. So that is, your church is tax exempt underneath that group ruling. Okay. And also, the exemption also means that you're able to receive the tax deductible donation. So that means that people giving money to you are able to claim that on their taxes. Okay. So the tax guide also talks about things that could jeopardize your tax exempt status. So these are things you want to make sure that you stay away from so that you're not ruining that status for your church. And those are that the earnings are not going to any private individual, that you're not involved substantially in lobbying or anything, political campaigns and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of information in there about the political. So if you have questions about that, I would read over this section as far as what is allowed and what isn't and that kind of thing. Okay. Okay, so let's look at page 16 in that guide. And we're going to talk a little bit about unrelated business income tax. So yes, you're tax exempt, but if you're having some of these activities that generate income that aren't related to the purpose of the church, then you would need to file for that income. So the kind of income that is subject to the unrelated business income tax is if the activity constitutes a trade or a business and it is regularly carried on and it is not substantially related to the organization's exempt purpose. So if all three of those are present, then that's something that you would need to file taxes for that income. There are a few exceptions, and this is not, you don't have to have all three of the exceptions. Having one of the exceptions is enough for that. If substantially all the work in operating the trade or business is performed by volunteers, that's one exception. If it is conducted primarily for the convenience of its members, That's a different exception. And if it involves the selling of merchandise, substantially all of which was donated. So there are some exceptions to the unrelated business income tax rules. And then in general, rents from real property, royalties, capital gains, and interest and dividends that are not subject to the unrelated business income tax unless it is financed with borrowed money. So if you don't have a mortgage on that property, then there would not be tax on that rental income. Okay. And when that's triggered of when you have to file that unrelated business income is if there is $1,000 or more earned on that income. And that's on page 17, that last paragraph. Okay. So page 18 talks about employment tax. Employment tax includes income tax withheld and paid for an employee and FICA taxes withheld and paid on behalf of the employee. So those, you're not exempt from payroll taxes. So we do pay FICA, but the church does not pay FUTA, the unemployment tax. So FICA consists of Social Security and Medicare, and wages paid to employees of the church are subject to FICA unless one of the following exceptions applies. Clergy do not pay FICA. Okay. And then for the FUTA, the churches and religious organizations are not liable for FUTA tax. So if you have an employee that tries to file for unemployment, that doesn't work when you've been working for the church. Okay. On page 19, there's information about clergy compensation, and Christine's going to go into more detail about that a little bit later today, but that is in there if you wanted to read more about that. And the same thing on page 20, there's information about accountable reimbursement plans and non-accountable reimbursement plans, but she's also going to talk about that a little bit later. Okay. On page 22 and 23, there is a table in there that helps you determine what tax returns and information that you do need to file. So if you look through there, you can see Form W-2, who needs to use them, organizations with employees, and when do I file them, by January 31st. So all the different forms that you could think of are going to be on here, and then you can determine whether or not your church would need to be filing that form. Okay. On page 24, it talks about charitable contributions. So, this is a big area for churches, so that some guidelines on how to provide information to your donors at the end of the year on their giving statements and that kind of thing. So, according to this IRS document, a donor cannot claim a tax deduction for any contribution of cash, a check, or other monetary gift unless the donor maintains a record of the contribution in the form of either a bank record, such as a canceled check, or written communication from the charity. And it needs to show the name of the charity, the date, and the amount. So the church is not required to send out a statement, but it is to the benefit of your donors, and I would think that you would want to provide that for your donors for their taxes. Mm-hmm.
And since you're not required to do that, does it have to be printed or can you actually email?
The email would be fine. That's still considered a written communication. Yes.
It mentioned the date of the contribution. Could you say for the year 2015 that it was given, or do you have to put the date of every contribution of every officer throughout the year?
Huh?
If you're giving
Yeah, you can say for the year, for the total for the year. There is some information about if a single contribution is $250 or more, that it may need a separate acknowledgement. That's on page 24. Okay. If you're receiving a donation that's not cash, you would want to provide a statement that says, this is what we received on the date, but you, as the church, would not assign a value to what they gave you. That is up to the donor to assign a value. Like if they donated a van or something to the church, they would be responsible for assigning the value of their donation. You would just state that this is what we received. And then at the bottom of the letter or the statement that you provide on page 25, the exception or to the disclosure statement, you're required to put that, you do want to put at the bottom that no goods or services were received in exchange for the donation. And there are some exceptions for these quid pro quo contributions on page 25.
Question. During the course of the year or at the end of the year, does the conference send out basically says what's inclusive in your the RAS that we must send? Because sometimes we have been told that RAS is moving in this direction, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to, at this point, we are required to follow suit. But at the end of the year, tax year, do you send out, or at the beginning, do you send out what things that the church must do?
I think if there's changes from year to year, we do publish that on our website, and that goes out in the emails and things that come out from the conference. As well as we have an email discussion group. If any of you are not in that group already and are interested, then you can email me and I can get you put in that group, and that allows you to talk to other treasurers, and we post announcements in there as well.
We have a system where you can actually go in and a donor can go into their account and they can see all of their donations and they can print on their own. Is that
That would be
acceptable?
yes.
To tell them if you can't do it, we'll send you one, but
As long as it has all the information, the name of your church, and that statement that says no goods or services were received, as long as all that's on that statement, then that would be fine. Then they can take the responsibility for printing that out.
Rita made it available, so.
Does anybody else have any questions about the tax guide? In tab I, there's information about documents that need to be saved and how long you need to save them. So if you are wondering, how long do I need to keep my bank statements, or how long do I need to keep payroll records, or any of those kinds of things, here is a resource that you can look and see. And this is from the general church. This is a pretty long list, so, I mean, if you just look on here, like how long do I need to keep contracts? Repairs, maintenance, and lease agreements and loans. Well, those need to be kept for 4 years for service contracts, 6 years for repairs, lease, loans. So any kind of document that you're wondering, do I really need to keep this? How long? You can go to this table and get the answer to that. And then also, what we talked about at the beginning of this segment is about the group ruling. And each church should have their own employee identification number. And if you have questions about how to get that number, if you've lost it, then there's different things the IRS recommends for getting it. You most likely use that when you open your bank account. So if for some reason you can't put your finger on that number, you could go back to the bank and see what number your account was open under. And then something that is very new, down at the bottom of that page in tab J, you can actually go onto the General Church website, umgroupruling.org, for more information, where you can actually pull down a letter stating that you are part of the group ruling there. There's some trick to it. Your name and your ID number need to match exactly what the IRS has in order for it to find you in there, but that is available online for you to be able to just get it yourself.
Thank you. So we've talked about on our tax requirements section of the agenda some of the different taxation issues for a local church. We're going to talk about taxation issues for clergy and payroll reporting and all of that in a few minutes, but this has been mostly, those types of things to deal with for churches. I will tell you, when you're doing your statements at the end of the year, your contribution statements for your members, that sentence that Jennifer told you about, no goods or services were received in exchange for this contribution, is very important. That has gone to court in Tennessee, where a lady was very generous in giving to her church, but that was not included on her statement. She was audited, and all of her gifts were disallowed because that was not on there. So they said, well, let us give you one now where it's on there, which they did, and they were still disallowed because it wasn't contemporaneous, so it wasn't given at the time of the gift. So it's just be careful when you're doing the statements and make sure it has all the information that they require, that the IRS requires on that, for that to be considered a charitable deduction.